The first time my mother-in-law made me feel like a stranger in my own marriage, she did it over a plate of roast chicken. She smiled while she destroyed me. That was the part one couldn't forget. It was a Friday night at Linda Carter's house in Connecticut, and I had spent 3 hours helping her prepare dinner. I had brought the dessert, set the table, and even remembered the wine she liked. I thought I was finally earning her respect. I was wrong. My husband, Daniel, sat beside me at the long dining table. Across from us were Linda and her husband, Robert. Everything looked perfect. The candles, the polished silverware, the expensive dishes Linda only used when she wanted to impress someone. Then Linda raised her glass. "To family," she said. Everyone lifted their glasses. I smiled. Then she looked directly at me. "Although," she added, "some people still have a lot to learn about what family really means." Daniel's smile disappeared. I lowered my glass. "Mom," he said quietly. Linda laughed. "Oh, don't be so sensitive, Daniel. I'm only talking." She turned toward Robert. "You remember when Daniel used to have standards?" Robert looked uncomfortable. "Linda." "What?" she asked innocently. "I'm not insulting anyone." Then she looked at me. "Emma, you know I care about you." That sentence was always dangerous. I nodded politely. "Of course." She leaned back in her chair. "But I still don't understand why you quit your corporate job." The table went silent. I had left my position at a marketing firm 6 months earlier to start my own small consulting business. It wasn't glamorous yet. I worked from a home office, handled every client myself, and sometimes wondered if I had made the right decision. But I was proud of it. Daniel was proud of me too. At least, I thought he was. "I wanted to build something of my own," I said. Linda smiled. "Build something?" I felt my stomach tighten. "Yes." She looked at Daniel. "That's an interesting way to describe being unemployed." Robert stared at his plate. Daniel immediately said, "She's not unemployed, Mom." Linda waved her hand. "I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking." Nobody spoke. I could feel my face getting warm. Then Linda delivered the sentence that changed everything. "Honestly, Daniel, I don't know how you can trust someone who walked away from a stable career and expects you to carry the financial responsibility." I looked at my husband. "Daniel." He reached for my hand underneath the table. "I know what Emma does. I trust her." Linda's expression hardened. "Do you?" That one question hung over the table. I tried to stay calm. "Linda, if there's something you want to say to me, you can say it directly." She smiled. "Oh, I'd rather not embarrass you." I almost laughed. "You've already done that." Robert finally spoke. "Linda, enough." But she wasn't finished. She picked up her wineglass and said, "Fine, I'll say it directly. Daniel deserves someone who contributes equally. Someone responsible. Someone who doesn't make reckless decisions and then expect everyone else to pretend they're brave." My chest tightened. I had tolerated her criticism for years. But that night, something inside me finally broke. "I have never asked Daniel to support me," I said. Linda looked at me. "Really? Really? Then perhaps you should tell him about the money." My blood went cold. Daniel turned toward me. "What money?" I stared at Linda. She had done it deliberately. She knew exactly what she was doing. "Linda," I whispered. She shrugged. "Didn't you tell him?" Daniel looked confused. "Tell me what?" I could barely breathe. 3 months earlier, Linda had privately asked me for help. She had told me Robert's business was struggling and that she needed $18,000 to cover an urgent payment. She promised it would be temporary. She also begged me not to tell Daniel because she didn't want him worrying about his father. I had believed her. I transferred the money from my business savings. She promised to repay me within 60 days. She never did. And now she was using that private act of kindness to make me look dishonest. Daniel stared at me. "Emma." I couldn't find the words. Linda leaned forward. "She gave your father and me $18,000 without telling you." Daniel's face changed. "What?" "I was going to tell you," I said. "When?" "I didn't want to put you in the middle." Linda gave a small laugh. "That's not exactly how she explained it to me." I looked at her sharply. "What did you tell him?" She turned to Daniel. "I told him Emma gave us the money because she felt guilty about how much she was costing you." The room seemed to disappear. That wasn't true. Not even close. I stood up. "I think I should go." Daniel stood too. "Emma, wait." Linda crossed her arms. "Running away won't change anything." I looked at her. "No. But staying here won't change you." I walked out. Daniel followed me onto the front porch. "Why didn't you tell me about the money?" "Because your mother asked me not to." He stared at me. "She asked you?" I nodded. "She said Robert's business needed help. She promised she'd repay me." Daniel rubbed his forehead. "Why would she lie?" I looked back through the window. Linda was standing inside, watching us. That's what I don't understand. Daniel came closer. I believe you. Those 3 words should have made me feel better. They didn't. Because something about Linda's behavior bothered me. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't embarrassed. She looked almost confident, as if she knew something I didn't. That night, Daniel and I barely spoke. I couldn't sleep. Around 2 in the morning, I got out of bed and went to my home office. I opened the folder where I kept my business records. The transfer was there. $18,000. Sent to an account belonging to Robert Carter's company. But then I noticed something I hadn't noticed before. The payment description had been changed. It originally said emergency business loan. Now it said personal gift. My heart started pounding. I hadn't changed it. And I knew my bank hadn't. Someone had altered the document. I opened the original email from Linda. My hands began to shake. Then I noticed the attachment. It wasn't a repayment agreement. It was a copy of a document I had never seen before. At the bottom was my electronic signature. And above it were words that made my stomach drop. Emma Carter agrees to transfer ownership of her consulting company to Robert Carter in exchange for financial assistance. I had never signed that. I had never agreed to it. Someone had forged my signature. And suddenly, Linda's humiliation at dinner didn't feel like an attack. It felt like a distraction. I stared at the screen, realizing my mother-in-law hadn't been trying to embarrass me. She had been trying to make sure nobody would believe me when the real accusation came. Then my phone buzzed. It was Daniel. One message. Emma, don't talk to Mom yet. I just found something in Dad's office. You need to see it. I stared at those words. And for the first time that night, I understood something terrifying. The $18,000 wasn't the real secret. It was only the beginning. I drove back to Linda and Robert's house before sunrise. Daniel was waiting for me in the driveway. He looked different. Not angry. Not confused. Afraid. What did you find? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened the passenger door of his car. Get in. I sat down. Daniel handed me a thin brown folder. I found this in Dad's locked desk. My hands were already shaking before I opened it. Inside were copies of bank statements, emails, and several business documents. I recognized Robert's company immediately. Carter Construction had been struggling for almost a year, although Robert had always insisted everything was fine. Then I saw the dates. The financial problems had started long before Linda asked me for money. Daniel. I whispered. He pointed to one statement. Look at the transfers. I followed the numbers. Over the previous 14 months, nearly $86,000 had been transferred from Robert's company into an account I didn't recognize. The account holder's name was Linda Carter. My heart sank. She took money from the company? Daniel nodded. Apparently. I looked at him. Why? That's what I don't know. I turned another page. Then I saw something even worse. Several transfers had been categorized as consulting expenses. But the money wasn't going to a consulting firm. It was going to a private account. Linda's private account. Daniel stared through the windshield. My dad discovered it 2 weeks ago. I looked at him. How do you know? Because I found an email. He handed me his phone. The email was from Robert to his attorney. The subject line read, Linda's unauthorized transfers. I read it twice. Robert had discovered that Linda had been moving money out of the company without telling him. He had planned to confront her. But the email ended abruptly. 2 days later, Robert had suffered a severe panic attack and stepped away from the business. Daniel swallowed. Mom told everyone Dad was sick because of stress. I slowly closed my eyes. And she blamed me. Not exactly. He looked at me. She blamed you for the money problems. Everything suddenly made sense. The dinner. The accusations. The forged document. She needed someone else to carry the blame. And I was convenient. But there was still one question. Why my company? Daniel looked at the folder. Because your company is growing. I frowned. What does that have to do with anything? Mom knows you signed a contract with a major regional retailer. I stared at him. That contract was worth more than anything I had ever done professionally. It was also confidential. How does she know? Daniel didn't answer. Then I remembered something. 6 weeks earlier, Linda had asked me a strange question. She had casually mentioned my company's name and asked how much revenue I expected that year. I had assumed she was making conversation. She wasn't. She had been investigating me. Daniel turned toward me. There's more. He opened another file. Inside was a printed email from Linda to someone named Michael Grant. Michael was Robert's longtime business accountant. The email was short. It said, once Emma signs the transfer, we can use her company as collateral and stabilize everything. Daniel doesn't need to know until it's done. My stomach dropped. She planned to take my company. Daniel's jaw tightened. Yes. I stared at the page. 4 months, I had defended this woman. I had made excuses for her. I had even given her $18,000 because I believed she was protecting her family. She had been planning to take everything I had built. Why didn't Dad stop her? He tried. Daniel pulled out another document. It was a letter from Robert's attorney. Robert had discovered the plan. He had refused to sign the necessary paperwork. Then Linda had threatened to tell the family that he had been secretly gambling with company money. I looked at Daniel. Was he? No. His voice cracked. My dad made mistakes, but he wasn't stealing. For the first time, I realized Daniel wasn't simply defending me. He was watching his entire understanding of his parents collapse. We sat silently for several seconds. Then I said, "We need evidence." Daniel looked at me. Not accusations. Evidence. He nodded. That morning, I called my attorney, Rachel Morgan. I told her everything. She asked me one question. Did you authorize any transfer of ownership? No. Did you sign any document giving your mother-in-law control over your company? No. Then don't confront her yet. I frowned. Why? Because if someone forged your signature, you don't warn them that you've discovered it. You preserve the evidence. That sentence changed our plan. For the next several days, Daniel and I said nothing to Linda. We acted normal. That was harder than I expected. She called me twice. The first time, she apologized for dinner. I was emotional, she said. I kept my voice calm. I understand. The second time, she said something that made my blood run cold. I hope you and Daniel aren't letting this little misunderstanding come between the family. Little misunderstanding. I almost laughed. Instead, I said, "Of course not." She seemed relieved. Good. Because there are some things we should discuss privately. I knew exactly what she meant. The forged transfer. She wanted to know whether I had discovered it. I didn't give her the satisfaction. Meanwhile, Rachel had forensic specialists examine the electronic signature. They discovered something important. The signature had been copied from an old document I had signed digitally. But whoever created the new document had made one mistake. The metadata showed the file had been created on a laptop registered to Linda Carter. We had proof. But Rachel warned us that we needed more. A voice recording. It was on an old tablet Robert had kept in his office. The recording had been made accidentally during a conference call. Linda's voice was unmistakable. She was talking to Michael Grant. And she wasn't talking about money. She was talking about me. If Emma refuses to sign, we'll make Daniel believe she's been hiding money from him. Michael sounded nervous. Linda, that's dangerous. Only if she can prove it. Then Linda said something that made my entire body go cold. Once Daniel thinks his wife betrayed him, he'll do whatever I tell him. I looked at Daniel. He had tears in his eyes. Not because he was angry, because he finally understood. His mother had been manipulating him for months. But the recording had one more surprise. Linda mentioned a second person. Someone we hadn't suspected. She said, "Michael already prepared everything. All we need now is Robert's signature." Daniel froze. Wait. He replayed the recording. Then he looked at me. My dad never signed anything. I nodded. Exactly. But Daniel shook his head. No, that's not what I mean. He pointed toward the screen. If Mom needed Dad's signature. He stopped. I felt a chill run through me. Then why did she already have a transfer document? Daniel stared at me. We both understood at the same time. The forged document wasn't the final step. It was part of a much larger plan. And someone had already submitted paperwork using my name. The next morning, Rachel called. Her voice was unusually serious. "Emma, you need to come to my office immediately." Why? There was a pause. Because I received a notice from the state business registry. My heart started pounding. What does it say? Rachel took a breath. According to their records, someone has already filed paperwork claiming you transferred ownership of your company. I couldn't speak. Then she added the words that changed everything. And Emma. Yes. The filing was submitted 3 days before your mother-in-law humiliated you at dinner. I stared at Daniel. The dinner hadn't been the beginning. It had been the cover-up. For a few seconds, I couldn't hear anything except my own heartbeat. Someone had filed paperwork claiming I had transferred my company 3 days before Linda humiliated me at dinner. That meant the dinner wasn't an emotional outburst. It was theater. Linda needed Daniel to believe I was dishonest before the truth came out. I looked at Rachel. What do we do? She didn't hesitate. We challenged the filing immediately. But more importantly, we let them believe they still have the advantage. That was the moment everything changed. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to Linda. I was preparing for her. Rachel filed an emergency objection with the state registry and preserved every piece of evidence: the forged document, the metadata, the bank records, the emails, and the recording from Robert's tablet. Then we contacted the bank that had received my $18,000. The bank confirmed something shocking. The money had been transferred into an account controlled by Linda. But less than 24 hours later, she had moved most of it into another account connected to a property investment. The money hadn't been used to save Robert's business. It had been used for Linda's private plans. And that wasn't even the worst part. The account receiving the money was connected to Michael Grant, Robert's accountant. Rachel looked at me. Now we know why Michael was helping her. Daniel shook his head. I trusted that man for 20 years. I know, I said. He looked at me. How did we miss all of this? I reached for his hand. Because you trusted your family. He looked down. And you. I trusted them too. That was the truth. But trust wasn't going to protect us anymore. Evidence would. 3 days later, Rachel arranged a meeting with Robert's attorney, Michael's professional board, and the state investigator handling the disputed filing. Linda and Michael were invited as well. Daniel and I arrived together. Linda was already sitting at the conference table. When she saw me, her expression changed. For the first time, she looked nervous. But only for a second. Then she smiled. Emma, I'm glad you're here. I sat across from her. So am I. She glanced at Daniel. Sweetheart, this whole thing has gotten completely out of control. Daniel didn't answer. Linda looked toward me. I've always wanted what was best for you. I almost smiled. That sentence would have hurt me a week earlier. Now it sounded empty. The investigator placed the disputed ownership document on the table. Mrs. Carter, do you recognize this document? Linda nodded. Yes. Emma signed it. I looked at her. No, I didn't. She sighed dramatically. This is exactly what I've been dealing with. Rachel slid a second document across the table. Then perhaps you can explain the metadata. Linda's face went pale. Michael immediately spoke. Metadata isn't conclusive. Rachel turned toward him. Agreed. She placed another folder on the table. That's why we brought the original electronic records. She opened her laptop. The investigator examined the files. Then Rachel played the recording. Linda's own voice filled the room. Once Daniel thinks his wife betrayed him, he'll do whatever I tell him. Silence. Linda stopped breathing for a moment. Daniel closed his eyes. Michael looked down. Then came the part Linda clearly hadn't expected. Robert spoke. I want to add something. Everyone turned toward him. He had entered the room quietly with his attorney. Linda stared at her husband. Robert. He placed a folder on the table. I kept copies of everything. He explained that 2 weeks before his panic attack, he had discovered Linda's unauthorized transfers. He had confronted her privately. She threatened him. Then she began moving the money through accounts controlled by Michael. Robert had planned to expose her. But before he could, Linda created another story. She told the family that Robert's financial mistakes were causing the company's problems. She even convinced him to step away temporarily. Robert looked at me. I'm sorry. I shook my head. You didn't create this. No, he said quietly. But I should have stopped it sooner. Linda suddenly stood. You are all twisting this. Her voice broke. I was trying to save this family. Rachel calmly replied, by stealing money and forging signatures? Linda stared at her. You don't understand. Daniel finally spoke. No, Mom. His voice was quiet. But I understand now. Linda looked at him. I did everything for you. Daniel shook his head. No. You did everything because you needed control. Her face collapsed. For years, I had imagined what it would feel like to see Linda finally confronted with the truth. I thought I would feel victorious. Instead, I felt tired. Not weak. Just tired. Because revenge hadn't brought me peace. The truth had. The investigator confirmed that the ownership filing would be rejected and referred the forged documents for further legal review. Michael's professional license was also placed under investigation. Linda was required to return the money that had been taken from Robert's company and repay the $18,000 she had taken from me. But there was one final surprise. Rachel called me into her office the following week. She handed me a document. What is this? Your company. I stared at her. The ownership filing has been officially rejected. Your company remains entirely yours. I smiled. But Rachel wasn't finished. There's something else. She handed me another letter. It was from the retailer I had signed the confidential contract with months earlier. They had reviewed everything. And instead of canceling our contract because of the scandal, they offered me a larger partnership. I stared at the number. It was more than double the original contract. I looked at Rachel. I don't understand. They said they were impressed by how you handled the situation. I laughed softly. After everything Linda had done to convince everyone that I wasn't capable of building anything, my business had just reached the biggest opportunity of its life. Months later, Daniel and I moved into a smaller house of our own. Not because we had to. Because we wanted a fresh start. We stopped attending family dinners where everyone pretended nothing had happened. We stopped explaining ourselves. And slowly, our marriage became stronger. Daniel apologized more than once. Not because he had believed his mother completely, but because he realized how often he had stayed silent when I needed him to speak. One evening, we sat on our back porch watching the sunset. Daniel looked at me. "Do you ever wish you'd never met my family?" I thought about it. "I wish I'd recognized the truth sooner." He nodded. "Do you hate my mother?" I looked across the yard. "No." He seemed surprised. "I don't hate her." "Why not?" "Because hate would mean she still has power over me." He smiled. "What does she have now?" I smiled back. "Nothing." And I meant it. Linda had tried to take my business. She had tried to destroy my marriage. She had humiliated me in front of the people I wanted to impress. But in the end, she gave me something I hadn't known I needed. The courage to stop begging people to see my worth. I no longer cared whether Linda respected me. I knew who I was. I knew what I had built. And I knew the truth. The night she humiliated me at dinner, she thought she was exposing my weakness. She didn't realize she was giving me the one thing I needed most. A reason to stop explaining myself. She tried to make me look like the villain in her story. In the end, the truth didn't need revenge, it only needed a chance to be heard.